The Afro-Mexican population is hardly talked about when discussing the African dispersion all across the globe due to the small number of people that identify as Black living there. Their history in this country is vague due to essentially being erased or overshadowed by the indigenous people around the time of their arrival. In order to understand how their history intertwined with Mexico's history, I will briefly discuss the time period where they were brought over to this country. There were three distinct periods of slavery that show how Africans were seen in Mexico from 1519 through 1827. From 1519 through 1580, Africans were brought from Europe with Spaniards as companions and slaves during the colonization of Mexico, formerly known as Nueva España. From 1580 through 1650, due to diseases and extreme working conditions, there was a decline in the population of the indigenous people, which increased the demand of African slaves. This increased the African population numbers of around 1,000 people to roughly 250,000 slaves being brought in from Africa. From 1650 to 1827, there was a heavy decline in slavery due to the rebellions in the country, and it was also just not as profitable as it once was. One very important Black figure in Mexico was Vicente Ramón Guerrero Saldaña. Due to local and regional struggles, many people living in Mexico wanted independence from Spain, so he joined the fight against Spain to help liberate the country. After years of fighting, they finally won their independence in 1821. With support from the common folk, Guerrero was made the second president of Mexico on April 1st, 1829. Being the first and only Black president, he sought to end slavery and abolished it on February 14th, 1829. During his short presidency, he improved the lives of the common folk. But due to the rampant colorism that plagued the country, many of the rich white elites in Mexico frowned upon his presidency. So in a depressing turn of events, they betrayed him by capturing him and executing him on February 14th, 1831. The Afro-Mexican population today. The Afro-Mexican population had been essentially erased from the general population in Mexico for quite a while now. A majority of Mexico writes off the African community, claiming that it doesn't exist because they are not racially mixed or fused with Mexican society. The erasure of Black identities in Mexico has slowly been leaving in recent years. In the 2015 census, Mexico added an option for its citizens to classify themselves as Afro-Mexicano. For the first time, Afro-Mexicans were represented on the census at around 1.4 million, roughly 1.2% of the country's population. There were also another 500,000 people who identified as part African in the country, bringing the total to 1.7%. Rather than being spread out around the whole country due to discrimination they would face, they have remained concentrated in certain parts of the country. These parts include, but are not limited to, Oaxaca with 4.95% of the population, Guerrero, named after Vicente Guerrero, at around 6.5% of the population, and Veracruz with 3.28% of the population being Afro-Mexicano. Racism in the country today. While the Afro-Mexican population is now recognized in Mexico, that does not mean they are well liked by majority of the people living there. Racism is still a big issue in the country and is shown repeatedly across the media. While Mexico produces many TV dramas that are popular in Latin America, you wouldn't see many Africans playing roles on the shows, and if they do, they tend to follow negative stereotypes or are humiliated. This type of racism only enforces these stereotypes to the viewers, furthering negative opinion towards them. It is also bad for the newer generations of Afro-Mexicanos, as they tend to form a sense of eternal racism against themselves. One event in particular that shows the African stereotype in Mexico was in 2005, where they created a stamp set to commemorate an old comic book called Memín Pinguín, which came out in the 1940s. The racist caricature of Black people drew international backlash. This, coupled with an interview by Vicente Fox, the president at the time, in which he compared Mexican immigrants to Black people in Mexico by mocking their financial status. This seemed to have been intentional to further the divide between Afro-Mexicans and Mexicans. These attempts at creating negative discourse between the two populations have not stopped Afro-Mexicans in continuing their fight for recognition and acceptance. To combat this, there have been many movements and organizations that have set out to change the lives of Black people living in Mexico. One of the most influential groups is Mexico Negro AC. In 1997, Sergio Peñalosa Perez, an Afro-Mexican activist, founded Mexico Negro AC in order to fight for the civil rights and aid for his people. Due to his efforts, he got the census to include Afro-Mexicanos in the 2015 census, a breakthrough for the community. Being recognized as a minority allowed them to officially be recognized by the government in 2020, allowing them access to government aid. Today, Perez is trying to align the ethnic minority groups to include Afro-Mexicano and African history in school curriculums across the country. There is also a government program that was founded in 1989, which was called La Tercera Raíz, or the Third Root. Their purpose was to do an in-depth research of the Afro-Mexicano population in order to add this knowledge to schools' curriculums across the country. Another group of people formed Huella Negra. They are dedicated to fight against the racial stereotypes against Black people in Mexico. A more recent social movement was the hashtag Soy Afro movement. Their goal was to make Afro-Mexicans proud of who they are and make it known that they exist. Taking a dive into their culture. The town with the highest population of Afro-Mexicanos is in Coajinicualapa, at around 230,000 Afro-Mexicanos. The city is rich in culture that is specific to their population. The way that they make their culture known is by having huge exhibitions that display their way of life. An example of this is in 1995, the Museum of Afro-Mestizo Cultures opened in Coajinicualapa, Guerrero, in the Costa Chica region, with the support of local communities. These public displays of culture made shifts in the recognition of Black culture, and in 2011, an even bigger display called Abriendo los Ojos, or Opening Our Eyes, was shown in Mexico City. This display showed images of people that lived in Oaxaca, Veracruz, and Guerrero. Another demonstration of African culture in Mexico is the Obatale group in Oaxaca. This group celebrates a unique version of the Day of the Dead. They perform La Danza de los Diablos, or the Dance of the Devils, on the same day to honor their dead. They also dress in traditional attire and dance to African-inspired rhythms. A smaller but also important part of African culture in Mexico is the food that they make. Africans originally brought the peanut to Mexico when first brought to the country, so everything made with peanuts today is technically possible because of the Afro-Mexicanos. For a future project involving this population, I would like to dive deeper into how the Afro-Mexican population is doing on the economic side. What jobs are they predominantly working as, and how much do they contribute to the country's GDP? I would also like to find out if there's a certain section of the population that has close ties with any region in Africa. This could also expand more on the culture for both countries and to see the influences they have on each other. Due to the limited research for the population, there is still much to learn about the people living in these regions. Thank you.